Hello there. Atito Atira Renelta Arluk. Good afternoon. My name is Renelta Arluk, and I come to you from Treaty 7 territory here in Banff, Alberta, Canada, also known as Manirpa, which means where waterfalls gather together here in Banff, which is the Stoney Nakoda word for water that comes together, Manirpa, which I learned through Daryl Kootenay and Elder Bill Snow when we were looking at land acknowledgements in this area. So I am the director of Indigenous Arts here at Banff Centre for Arts and Creativity, and I have been here for about 5 years now. I'm originally from the Northwest Territories. My mother is Dene Suslane and Cree from Treaty 8 Territory in Wood Buffalo region, which is where our incredible guest, Richard Van Camp, is also from, and my father is Unuvialuk Gwich'en from the Unuvika-Klavik region. So ancestrally from the Northwest Territories, both sides of my family, and have been really learning what it's like to live in the mountains after being raised in such vast land with deep waters and eyes, as far as you can see. But one thing I've really been grateful for about living here in Treaty 7, home of Stoney Nakoda, Blackfoot Confederacy, Tsutana of the Dene, and Métis Region 3, is that there is a definite gathering, welcoming, high energy that comes from living in the mountains. And I always say having the mountains is like looking in a big mirror, that what you see is what is reflected back to you. And that's a big gift that I've been able to have since I've been here. So this is I'm going to call it our second season of Decolonizing the Narrative. I called it Decolonizing the Narrative because I think there's something very interesting about Indigenous art leaders in their field engaging with the values and teachings of indigeneity and putting them into this contemporary context. And so we've been having some really incredible conversations last year and this year. I'm really grateful to be able to start it off with a dear friend, definitely someone that I greatly admire, and someone who is just constantly pushing the boundaries of what it is to be a writer and a storyteller in this country, and that is Richard Van Camp. And so Richard Van Camp is a proud Tlicho Dene from Fort Smith, Northwest Territories. He is the best-selling author of 27 books in just about every genre. His novel, The Lesser Blessed, is now a feature film with First Generation Films. Three Feathers, the movie, is based on his graphic novel with Crystal Matthias, and it is the only movie ever shot in 4 languages: Bush, Cree, Dene, South Slavey, and English. And if you want to learn more about Richard, we'll make sure we put his links in the chat. But of course, his website is richardvancamp.com. So I just want to welcome Richard Van Camp into the room.
Hi, Renalta. Masi Cho. Thanks, everybody, for joining us this evening. Hopefully, everybody is safe and happy and healthy. And I'm really looking forward to sharing a story with you this evening. And I would like to just invite you all, before I begin, go get a glass of water or some tea or some chaga or some coffee. I want you to be comfortable. I want you to sit back. I want you to relax and just enjoy a very mysterious story. The story I'm going to read to you is from Moccasin Square Gardens. It's called Grandpa Etse. And before I begin, I'm in Treaty 6 country this evening. I'm in Edmonton, Alberta, in our beautiful home here in Old Strathcona. And I'm from Treaty 8 country. I grew up with Renalta Arluk, and I'm really grateful to be with her this evening. It's always so lovely to do anything with the Banff Centre. I really miss being there in person. I love what it does for Canada. I love that they say you will always do your greatest work while you are in attendance at the Banff Centre. So Masi Cho, from the bottom of my heart. Make sure you are comfortable. I want you to relax. I'll tell you a little bit about myself while you're grabbing your tea or your coffee or your chaga or your water, whatever you want, whatever you need. I was born September 8, 1971 in Fort Smith, Northwest Territories. So Fort Smith is Treaty 8 country. It is population 2,500. We are officially quadrilingual. And what that means is Chipewyan, Cree, French, and English are spoken at any given time. We're the Métis capital of the Northwest Territories. So growing up, the moon to me was Kalaza, which is Chipewyan. Archie Smith taught me that. And Venus is Oginans, that's Bush Cree. And the Northern Lights is Naka in Tlicho in my language. So growing up, we had this beautiful garden of so many cultures, so many languages, so many traditions. And I think that everybody from Fort Smith who grew up in the 70s and the 80s, I really do feel we were all blessed because we had the best of the North. We also had the best of the South. We grew up watching the Beachcombers and the Edge of Night and Fast Times at Ridgemont High, Degrassi Junior High, Porky's, Zapped, Star Wars, Aliens, Predator, Savage Sword of Conan with Arnold Schwarzenegger. At the same time, we had our elders, we had The Land, we had Skidoos, we had PWK High, and it was just the best time. I'm just so grateful that I had that in my heart and soul. And so the story I'm going to read to you tonight, Grandpa Etse, really celebrates the beauty of growing up in the 80s. It also celebrates 3 different communities in Denendeh, which is the Western Arctic. And I'm just going to start. So it's 33 minutes. Relax, take it easy, enjoy yourself. And the reason I wanted to share this with you is no one on this planet is more surprised that I wrote this story. No one is more surprised than me that I was gifted with this story. And it goes like this. It's called Etse Grandpa. The time I showed my Etse the movie E.T., it was years ago. He was in on his own from Betchoko, getting a checkup. My grandmother was, well, they had had a disagreement. It was summer. My mom's house was quiet, peaceful. She'd worked hard to rebuild her life after she and her boyfriend separated. There were rumors Patrick was having an affair. He denied it up and down, but Mom had the sense. So she decided to take a job in Yellowknife, 8 hours north from Fort Smith. The idea was for Patrick and her to take some time to think about what was going to happen next. Patrick and I had gotten along great for the past 9 years. I just couldn't imagine him cheating. The situation was so unbelievable that I wasn't sure what to do. But I did know my mom needed help around the new house she was renting. It was weird because our family had built a log home when we were all together. My question was, why did Patrick get to stay in our family's log house, which my father had built with his bare hands? All of this was why I'd chosen Yellowknife for the summer as a part-time student researcher with the Dene National Office. To help my mom and be closer to my grandparents, Etse and Etse lived an hour and 35 minutes down the road in Fort Ray. Betchoko, as they were calling it now, or perhaps as it had always been named. I was watching Oprah after spending the day raking, bagging leaves, and tidying up my mom's yard. I'd had a toke and was feeling buzzed. There was a knock on the door. I went around the corner, and there, through the curtains, was the perfect silhouette of my grandfather, puffing his little pipe. Etse, said with breath, said with respect. Etse, the miracle worker, the medicine man, the chanter, the holy man. Grandpa was looking away, as if listening to something. I ran back, grabbed my camera, snuck up on the perfect portrait, and took it. I answered the door after putting my camera down. It will always be the greatest picture of our lifetime together. Tlicho, he spoke what they used to call us, dog rib. He said my mother's name, and I told him she was at work, that she'd be home soon. He stood there, looking away. He folded his hands around his pipe before sliding it into his jacket pocket. I never saw him light that pipe, not once. He just liked the taste of it, I guess. It was made of either clay or red willow. I never saw it up close. It was rumored that was where he kept his medicine power. Lidi Nawuni, I asked him, would you like some tea? Heh, he said and came in. It took him forever to take off his moccasin rubbers, and I could smell bush smoke on him. Nizi, I asked him, are you good? Heh, he said. Good, he said in English. We were from worlds apart, yet his blood flowed through mine. I was proud to be his grandson. He looked so small without my Etse. How I remember the difference in the words is with etsi for grandma, I always think the final E sound is stronger than the final A sound in etsi. Just like owls and ravens, the female is always stronger, bigger. That's how my grandparents were. My grandmother was cheeky, tough, firm, yet she cried when we arrived for a visit, and she cried when we were leaving. She'd kiss our hands and bow, kiss our hands and bow, kiss our hands. I motioned for my grandfather to have a seat in the living room, said that I would call my mom. Maybe her boss would let her leave early. I put the water on to boil. My grandfather sat in my mom's living room on the big couch and looked up at all the photos. My sister, my dad, so many pictures of my mom with Patrick, her hope for them as a couple all over the room. It was like she was manifesting their happiness. And there were pictures of Grandpa, Etsi, them together, our uncles, all the art, all the plants, the books, the TV. I tried calling my mom's office, but she had moved to another department and no one could find her number. It was lame. I had rented E.T. the night before from the Yellowknife Library, my favorite place on earth, along with the loft my father had built for me in the log house. I wanted to watch the movie again and see if it had stood the test of time. After a minute, I hit play and it started. I motioned to my grandfather that a good movie was coming on. He crossed his legs, squinted, and sat back to watch the film that had changed my life forever. He watched intently, but he kept looking right. It was as if he'd forgotten that my grandmother wasn't there beside him. I decided to make toast and butter and jam for my grandfather. We had no dry meat left. My mom and I were mooches who showed up in Betchoko and usually took a big brown bag of it home. As I prepared his tea, I thought of him in the next room. He'd lost his entire family decades ago, and as a young boy, an orphan, made his way through the Mackenzie Mountains to be with the Tlicho, the dog rib. He was a mountain Dene. He and his dog found the way together, and when they got to Tlicho territory, they were met by guards. TB and influenza were killing many Dene. My Etse was not welcome at first, but he explained where he was from, and they asked him how long it had taken him to travel there. He told them, and the guards looked at each other. They did not believe that you could make it through to the barren lands in that short of a time. I will show you, Etse told them, me and my dog. And he did. The route shaved off 2 extra days of traveling for the Tlicho, and that is why we have our family name. Si, it means mountain. I had also heard that my grandfather performed many miracles when he was young. He took a hunter's appendix out with his knife. He cured a stutterer. He tied a man's mouth shut over a distance, a man who was spreading lies about us as a family. And now we were here together, watching E.T. From time to time, he would point to the TV, and I could tell he wanted to ask me questions. I did my best to answer using sign language. As happy as I was, I felt that old soul ache of not being fluent in Tlicho. I had about 80 words in me, but I wasn't conversational. Being fluent was my dream. It was always my dream. I was so worried about our language, but I was raised away from the Tlicho, and we never spoke it at home. Grandpa cried when he thought E.T. was going to die. I cried too. We took turns blowing our noses into Kleenex. I kept the movie running so we could each maintain our dignity. At the end, my grandfather was so happy. When the credits came on, he gave me a thumbs up and smiled. Nizi, he said. I helped him into the bathroom, and then I helped him out onto our porch and settled him in a chair. He tasted his pipe and I made him more tea. I asked him if he was hungry. He wrinkled his nose and shook his head. Good movie, he said. Good boy. Good friend. I almost started crying again. He tried asking me questions about my life, but I didn't know if I answered correctly. He nodded, watching me, watching me, watching me. My grandpa. I showed him my portraits of elders from different nations, all the children too. I carry my portfolio around for clients. For him to see the button blankets, the Sundance makers, the matriarchs, the braids, the beautiful brown skin, the veterans, the pride. He patted my shoulder and nodded. Nizine, he said, Nizine. I told him that I was working on my master's at UBC and that the people there were strong, the Musqueam. I told him I helped out a lot with ceremonies on campus, sweat lodges. I said I was getting ready to go into the lodge when I returned. I saw him stop nodding, and he looked at me in a new way. My mom came home, and soon after that, my uncles showed up. They drove my etse the hour and 35 minutes that it takes to return to Bechuco. That night, my mother woke me up to say that Grandma was on the phone. She had a message for me from Grandpa, which my mom translated. Grandpa says you are not to go into the sweat lodge because that is not our way. That medicine is from the south. When you go in, they wrap a blanket around you. The more times you go in, the more blankets. If Grandpa ever has to work on you, even from the other side, he will have to take off those blankets, and he could lose time. He could lose you trying to take those blankets off, grandson. I nodded as my mom passed on my grandma's message. I listened and understood. You can help, my grandma relayed through my mom. Help them with the fire, the water, but you must not go in. You are our grandson. Will you listen? I nodded. Say it, my mom said. I will not go in, I said. She and her mom spoke Tlicho, and then my mom hung up. How come my dad told her you showed him a movie about a mushroom who helped a boy? She asked me. A mushroom? I said. Yes, she said. She looked very serious. I started laughing. It was E.T. What? Why did you show him that movie? Because you never gave me your new work number, I said. I had no choice. Then she started laughing too. Know how to say mushroom in Tlicho? She asked. Doodly. It means squirrel food or frog house. I could have asked why she never taught my sister and me Tlicho, but I didn't. I knew that we had been raised in Smith because of the drinking and violence and chaos in Bechuco. In Smith, we were raised with the Cree, the Chipewyan, the French, the Gwich'in, the Inuit, the Slavey, and other friends from across Canada. We had a happy upbringing. We built our own log house as a family. I think that was our proudest achievement. Well, and we partied tamely. We were proud of that too. I was happy for a long time after that because I felt like my grandfather had heard me. He'd understood. I was happy he thought of E.T. when he thought of me. I was so proud I'd shown him the portraits I was taking. Even so, to my shame, I did not see him or my etse again that summer. I was caught up with work in the small capital city of Yellowknife, the cookouts in Mum's backyard, my weed. My uncles were always in competition to help Grandpa because it was rumored that my etse was going to choose soon who to pass his medicine on to when he crossed over. The only problem was that my uncles drank hard. One by one, they were losing their families by getting kicked out. One or another would show up at Mum's door at 4 a.m, asking for money and a coffee. Sometimes my mum let them in. Sometimes we waited them out. As time went on, I got interested in becoming an archivist. I would devote my life to archiving and helping the people. I decided I would be able to share recordings from elders I had interviewed years or decades before. I kept taking portraits and I started selling my services. I'd move into a community for a month or two and archive, photograph, interview community members, leaders, and elders. I loved it. I was positive that this was why I was born. When the invitation came for me to be the Tlicho archivist in residence, I jumped at the chance. I was in a disastrous relationship at the time, abusive. Holy cow, Harmony just dragged me right out. I had little left of myself, but this was my chance. Harmony helped me pack, and I think we both knew I was never coming back. My stories had no power with her or her family or her friends. No one had time for them. I could tell she didn't believe half of what I shared with her about the North, my family, what I was hoping could be ours. By the time I left, I was soul sick. I felt my old self returning with every mile I gained on my return to Yellowknife. I had a week there before my 2 months in Betchoko. My mom was overjoyed that I was free. She'd seen me vanish in that relationship with Harmony, had heard it in my voice when she called. Now that I was in my mom's new home, I relaxed onto her couch, her cooking, her laughter. The North was going to cure me. My clothes didn't fit me anymore. I didn't fit in the world. I'd always enjoyed my pot, but over time, I'd become a gentle slave to it. I knew exactly how many days I had left in my stash, how many joints, how many puffs, how many, how many, how many. When I first got high as a teenager, my tongue used to tingle. I used to wait for that, hope for it, ride it out, let it take its time. Now my tongue just felt fat. Explain that, someone. The tingle was gone and I missed it. When I moved to Betchoko, I had a mild panic attack. Where would I buy my weed when I ran out? It was such a small town, and I didn't want anyone to know I puffed. I detested the idea of going to Yellowknife to score when all I wanted was to stay still and breathe in as much Tlicho everything as I could. My time there was my chance to become conversational, and I did my best. Ja for snow, Gocho for ancestors, Adu for I'm scared, baby steps. The work was pretty simple. I lived in a teacher's house, fully furnished. She was down south on maternity leave, and I interviewed elders and took portraits of the kids and elders and teachers. At night, I would upload the portraits along with each person's signed permission and transcribe the interviews I'd done. Holy cow, it was fun. I learned a lot. I learned about protocol for handling caribou bones and hide. I learned about the Chipewyan Dogrib War and how the leaders Akecho and Edzo had made peace together at Marion Lake. I recorded stories like how Frog brought winter for everyone, the time the Blue Jay and Whiskey Jack traded wives, and a heartbreaking story about why we need to listen to our parents when they tell us to work or move quickly. I had no idea we believed in reincarnation. I learned from other elders about a game that my grandfather used to play, where he dressed up in a mask and chased people. It was a ceremony I wrote down called Zekwe. The ceremony was so scary the priest had tried to forbid it, but the people continued the game in secret. My grandfather and grandmother were out on the land when I started my term in Betchoko at Stag River. I couldn't wait to see them, to record them, to take their portraits, to share time. Most of the junior elders I photographed would ask me the same question. Has your grandpa decided yet who gets his medicine? I thought it curious. Most elder elders didn't ask me that. It was the younger generation who did. I'd shrug, oh, I'm not too sure. I did hear rumors about my uncles arguing over who had been the best son. Yet, and I hate to say it, these were the same uncles I'd see drinking, stumbling on wobbly legs at 6 a.m., either in Betchoko or out on the streets in Yellowknife. Booze was eating my family alive. That's why I didn't drink. I never had. One thing I learned in community discussions, and a thing that worried me, was that the Bathurst caribou numbers had dwindled from hundreds of thousands to only 19,000. We were down to a system where we hunted with tags. The majority of northern leaders agreed this was the best way to manage the herd, yet there was still poaching and worse, the wasting of meat by our own people. I had heard a long time earlier that the Cree say, when you break a treaty with the animals, like you make them suffer or you waste the gift of them, what comes doesn't come for you, it comes for your children. As the weeks passed, I could see my payments were not coming from the band. At first, I thought maybe there was a hold on payment, but after 3 weeks, my visa was maxed out and I was running low on my weed supply. I had $36 in my wallet. That was it. This was me. And when I didn't have my 3 daily puffs, I got achy, snappy, dazed. F this, I thought one morning after I'd been checking my bank account 100 times a day. If they're not going to pay me, I'm taking the rest of the day off. I decided to make a run to Yellowknife. And who did I see on the highway waiting for me outside of Betchoko? My grandparents. Oh dear, I thought. As happy as I was to see them, I had heard stories from my uncles about the scenarios they were capable of in terms of their elderly demands. I knew that if I picked them up, it would be bingo, Walmart, KFC, more bingo, church, A&W, back to bingo, possibly paying for them at the Super 8 for a night, plus bags and bags of groceries that I'd have to pay for, along with meals out all day, all weekend. My mom was visiting friends in Fort Providence, and she had both her house keys. I had no money. I was going through withdrawal. A headache was starting to split my head wide open, and I needed a puff of the good stuff. They flagged me down. My grandmother was waving her arms around like windmills, but when my grandpa waved his hand waist high, well, how could I say no? He never asked me for anything. I had a soft spot. Maybe he could take away my headache. I pulled over. As they got in, my grandmother climbed right in the back and fell asleep. Her luggage was a plastic northern bag with a change of clothes in it, or maybe it was knitting and a pillow. I could smell the heavenly scent of fresh tan moose hide. My grandfather wasn't carrying anything except his little pipe, which he put in his front pocket before getting settled. Maybe this was only a day trip, a quick trip. He looked at me, shook my hand, smiled, and then fell asleep. I decided to drive and make the most of this. As we headed towards Yellowknife, I remembered that I had hidden a joint on the inside panel of the truck on the driver's side, behind some paperwork. I reached in and found it. Yes. I waited another 20 minutes, slowed down, lowered my window, and decided to light up. It was 4:20 somewhere. Long story short, my grandfather asked in Tlicho, "What smells like dirty socks?" I told him it was a cigarette from the United States of America. He told me to let him try. He was going to show me. To this day, I do not know what overcame me. I've always had a problem with sharing. Ask my sister, she'll tell you. I told Grandpa that he had to hold the smoke in his lungs. He did exactly that. And then he coughed, 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 which woke my grandmother up. She told us both we didn't know what we were doing. She was going to show us. My grandfather explained that these were the smokes that John Wayne used to smoke, and that you had to hold the smoke in, which she did before she coughed, coughed, coughed. All of this and no water in the vehicle. So we took turns hotboxing in my truck, and then we ended up entering the city by the airport. "I'm hungry," my Etsy said. Grandpa said, "Me too." They both looked straight ahead. "KFC?" my grandmother asked. I nodded. I could afford KFC for all of us. The crazy thing, though, was when we arrived, my grandmother got the giggles. Then my grandfather got the giggles. Then I got the giggles. I wasn't stoned. I was buzzed, but this was so wonderful to see my grandparents laughing. When we walked into KFC, they were laughing so hard that all of the elders there started laughing. They'd never seen my grandparents laugh so hard in their whole lives. Even the cooks came out to look, and they started laughing. "What's so funny?" my grandfather asked. "Why am I laughing?" "I don't know," Grandma said. "I'm laughing too." I stood there in a garden of laughing elders. I should have taken pictures or a quick video, but the truth is, I just realized what I had done. I'd gotten my beautiful grandparents stoned because of my selfishness and stupidity. I felt horrible. It was then that I received a bank alert. Money for the whole month had just been deposited in my account with an apology from the Tlicho government. Somebody thought that this one department had paid me, but I was a new account. I'd fallen between the cracks. I was looking at more money than I had seen in my account in a good long while. And there we were in KFC with my grandparents wiping their eyes and laughing. I decided right then and there I'd quit smoking pot forever. I also decided to pay for the best weekend of my grandparents' lives. And it was. There was KFC, bingo, Walmart, A&W, the Fat Fox for coffee. My grandfather loved their scones, which he called baby bannocks, and he loved their coffee. Etsy had tea, black tea with lots of cream. I insisted that they stay at the Super 8, and we did it all over again the next day with church, shopping, and more church before hitting the independent grocery store and driving back to Betchoko. As I dropped them off at the old folks' home in Betchoko and helped haul all of their groceries into their suite, I knew they'd be eating well for weeks if my uncles didn't clean them out first. After I loaded up their freezer, I felt my grandfather give my shoulder a gentle squeeze. Masi Cho, he said, grandson. I'd never been so proud, and I decided to forgive myself for the marijuana incident. My mother found out about the KFC event and called me. She had spoken to my grandparents and then had gone to town on a research mission. My grandparents had left out the American cigarette information, but I suspected my mom suspected. She was the reason I knew in English what everyone at KFC was still talking about. A few months later, after a bout of pneumonia and a deep cough that he couldn't shake, well, we were all called to spend time with my etse around his bed. A tough, bossy Tlicho nurse named Jennifer was there from the health center, checking up on both my grandparents. I was scared of her and intrigued at the same time. Jennifer wouldn't make eye contact with me, but she softened whenever she was around Etse and Etse. It was beautiful to hear them talking Tlicho, and they'd often laugh at inside jokes about things. Sadly, my uncles were still drinking. We could smell it on them. They were already grieving. But I was honored to be asked to take portraits at what became a family reunion. Cousins, aunts, great aunts, community, good food, lovely hymns, lots of laughter, hours of stories, which I recorded with permission, were there for me to start sharing as soon as I returned to my master computer in my little rented home in Betchiko. My grandfather asked to see my portfolios again. I had 10 different albums now that showcased my work. I left to go get them, and when I returned, everyone else had gone home to rest. It was just me, Jennifer, and my grandparents. Etse stirred. He was propped up on many pillows to ease the congestion in his lungs. My grandmother was asleep on the bed, all curled up under a comforter, holding his hand. In her right hand was his pipe. I ached now thinking I should have taken that shot, but I decided to keep it just for myself as a testimony of eternal love. Grandson, my Etse called me in a whisper. I knelt and held his hand. To my surprise, I found myself weeping. Grandpa, I whispered, Etse. He started speaking in Tlicho, and I started to panic. Jennifer was in the room making tea. What? I asked. What is it, Grandpa? Do you want me to translate? Jennifer asked. It was the first time she had looked at me. She looked directly into my soul. Yes, please. Do you have any of those John Wayne cigarettes? He asked me, with Jennifer translating. I shook my head. Ile, I said. Sorry, they stopped making them. Too tough for the people. Estia, he said. I could sure use one right now. I nodded. I know. Maybe just rest, sleep, dream. He looked up at the ceiling, and I wondered if this was it. He spoke, and Jennifer translated. What do you think happened to that mushroom and that little boy? I was worried that if I didn't say something, we'd lose him. I motioned to Jennifer, and she sat down beside me and put her hand on my shoulder. To this day, I don't know what came over me. I used both of my hands to hold his. Etse, I think what happened was E.T. would come back to Earth time and time again to help that little boy as he grew. Like maybe Elliot had a reading disability, so E.T. used the power of the glow in his dark finger and healed the boy by touching his lymph nodes and his third eye. And then Elliot was a straight A student after that. No one could figure it out. How had back of the class gone right to the top? It was a miracle. Then Elliot grew up and met someone very special and decided to get married. But he was worried that E.T. would miss out. So he and his sweetie decided to have a garden wedding with fireworks after to let E.T. know he was just fine, that he was no longer alone. And when Elliot was saying his vows and looking out at the crowd, really, he was looking for his little buddy made of mushrooms. And to his surprise, a whole bunch of ETs all started waving at him. And there was his buddy too. Elliot started to cry. Through his tears, He could see all the ETs raising their hands and all of them pointing fingers lit up with radiant love in salutes, just like AC/DC when they sing for those about to rock. But it was for friendship and best wishes. So, Grandpa, my beautiful Etse, I believe with all my heart that this is what happened to the mushroom and the little boy who grew up to be a great father and loving husband and one day an Etse like you. I felt his hand fall away. Jennifer squeezed my shoulder, sending me strength. I looked up through my tears. My grandfather was snoring. Geez, she whispered. I thought that was it. Thank goodness that he hadn't passed while I was sharing a web of warmed up fibs. Thank you, I said. Mussy Cho. She went back to not looking at me. Are these photo books yours? She asked. Have a look, I said. Yes. I went to make tea and could still feel the spirit of her hand on my back. We had 2 more days with my Etse, with the entire community praying, with many visitors stopping by. Jennifer translated for me and stayed with us, even during her downtime. I had a dream that second night. Jennifer was reaching around with one hand in a smoky room for a perfect line of light. She traced the light in the heart of her palm. Then I watched her walk barefoot into the snow with a little cross fox trailing her. She stopped and held her hand out, and the little fox came up and pressed its nose into her palm where the light warmed it. Jennifer looked back at me in the dream and smiled. When Etse passed, he sighed. I felt him pass through me as I held his feet and cried. Grandma cried, my mom cried, we all cried, even Jennifer. I believe that his dog was waiting for him, so happy to see him again. I believe they made their spirit trails through the Mackenzie Mountains to be with their families before attending the big feast in the sky. The night Etse passed, the power lines outside the church hummed under the pads of my moccasined feet as my spirit floated toward the highway. Grandson, a voice said, and I looked left. I couldn't see him, but I felt his presence. Let's fly, he said. We soared and flew north together. As we flew, we saw the trees getting smaller and smaller. We saw the mountains. Look, he said, and I did. Thousands and thousands of caribou were waiting. I could see little ones leaping, yearlings. It was like an ocean of antlers. They were so strong. When you hold your dreaming daughter, he told me, you bring her back here. Show her. I promised that I would. Keep honoring the people, he said. I am so proud of you. And with that, I realized his voice was going up and up. I soared above the caribou. Many of them looked up. I waved, but I flew to Fort Smith of all places when I knew I should return to my body in Betchico. I could see Fort Smith's water tower, the church, Kaiser's, the Northern, the drugstore. I could see Roaring Rapids Hall, AKA Moccasin Square Gardens. The next morning, I awoke in my old bed in my loft in our log house. The smell in that house hit me like a brick. Drinking, hard drinking, sweat, old booze. As I climbed down the stairs onto the main floor, I saw bottles everywhere. People had been smoking in our house too. I was so mad it felt like someone was dragging a rusty fork back and forth across my soul. Patrick's jaw dropped when he saw me. He was cooking for some blonde woman. She was petite and smoking. No one was allowed to smoke in our house. The woman's hair was cut short. There were hickeys all over her neck. Holy shit, he said. The woman stood, tucking my mother's bathrobe tight. How did you get here? I looked around. The house was the same. I came in late last night, I bluffed, in town for work. He looked at his girlfriend, and she looked at me. She pulled the collar of my mom's housecoat up to cover Patrick's hickeys, but it was too late. We had all felt something drop in the room. The Fort Smither came out in me. I decided not to be fazed, to be polite, to bide my time and get to the truth. I'm Paula. Pleased to meet you, the woman said. and we shook hands. I bowed and said the same. Want some eggs and toast? Patrick asked, avoiding my eyes. He was blushing. I have bacon. Sure, I said. I realized I was starving. I should go, Paula said. She walked down the hall toward the room my mother had shared with Patrick for years. I looked over at the chair at the head of the table where my father's favorite shirt had always hung. It was gone. Patrick had promised us he'd always leave it there as a sign of respect. I knew my mom didn't have it. I went to Patrick and hugged him. He smelled rancid, booze sweat, perfume, and vomit. This was the hug of goodbye. This was my father's house. He knew it. I knew it. Patrick had broken us now and forever. Want some coffee? He asked. Sure, I said. He poured and I took my cup. We sat quietly. The radio playing could never be loud enough to drown out the panic in the room. I'm sorry, he said finally, as he raised the coffee to his lips. I'm sorry you came home to this. Me too. I'll move out tomorrow, he said. Underneath the couch, covered in lint and hair, I could see my father's shirt. I pulled it out, dusted it off, put it back where it belonged. Okay, I said. It was then that I got a shock. I felt my grandfather's pipe in my pants pocket, a divine gift. I would take out the pipe later, make a fire and drop tobacco into the flames and pray. For now, I stayed sitting at the table we had bought from Kaiser's right before my father passed. Patrick cooked in silence. I let him. Words would only get in the way. Underneath the table, I folded my hands together. How would I tell my mother what had happened, or should I? Shamans were secretive, I knew. They had to be. I could feel Jennifer's hand on my back, and my palms were already calling our dreaming daughter's name. Thank you. Tlicho. Thanks for listening. That was Grandpa Etse from Moccasin Square Gardens. And no one is more surprised that I was chosen to write that story. Tlicho, thank you.
Goodness, Richard.
Goodness.
Oh my goodness, you're so good.
No, I'm not good. It's my editors who make me good. My editors who make me Nazim. So the editor for Moccasin Square Gardens was Barbara Pulling and Cheryl Cohen, and Barbara was my editor for The Lesser Blessed. So The Lesser Blessed came out in 1996, and to work with Barbara Pulling was even then in 1996. She just uses a pencil. Everything she does is in pencil. We hadn't worked together in 23 years. And so when I sent Moccasin Square Gardens, most of those stories had already been published in literary journals and anthologies. And it didn't matter. It didn't matter. She rearranged them in order. I have the manuscript just over here. And every once in a while, I look at it, and there are thousands of comments and suggestions and cuttings and X's. And so I think I'm an okay writer. It's actually our editors who make us, who make the stories far more magnificent. And so I just really want to acknowledge Barbara Pulling and Cheryl Cohen for editing me so hard for Moccasin Square Garden. So thank you.
Thank you. I have so many thoughts that go with that, but I wanted to just honor some of the previous conversation we had, which was, I kind of knew you were becoming kind of a big deal. I mean, it's hard when we come from a small community of like 1,100, and we carry our dreams with us, and we speak our dreams and our visions, and when you come from a small town with such big dreams, you kind of wonder, what does that look like outside of our community? And then I ran into you in Yellowknife, and you have been doing some writing for North of 60, and you said you wanted to talk a bit about that.
Sure. Oh, thank you, Renalta. So I'll tell you, I'll give you some juicy gossip. I think we're standing where we stand, Renalta. You and I, we got some pretty big footsteps to follow. I mean, my trail breakers were Ruby Slipperjack, the late and great Lee Miracle, late and great Maurice Kenny, Jeanette Armstrong, Christos. I think about Minnie Freeman. I think about Alatuk Ipley, the late Alatuk Ipley. I think about everyone I really deeply admire as writers and as storytellers and as performing artists. And so where I learned to write, and I think that it's safe to say the biggest mistake that we make in Canada is usually in high school. We tell students in English class, you have to choose in this life if you want to be a writer. You either can be a prose writer and do fiction, nonfiction, and I pray that you write the novel, the almighty novel, or you can be the lowly poet and be broke and be a barefoot doctor and just live a life of pain and misery. And I think that is just the saddest thing, one of the saddest things in the whole wide world, because when I attended the Anilkin International School of Writing in Penticton, and I got to learn from Lee Miracle and Jeanette Armstrong and Maurice Kenny and Jerry William, what they shared with me is that you don't ever have to choose. The story is the boss. And if it wants to be a poem or a short story or a one-page novel or a tweet or a Facebook status update or a novel, it needs to be what it wants to be. And so I graduated from the Anilkin Centre, and I was working on a little book then. I didn't know it'd be The Lesser Blessed, but it was called Me and Johnny. And it just started off as a short story, then it became a novella, and then it became The Lesser Blessed. And I was working on it after I graduated. And I was working for Moise and Joyce Rebeska at a bush camp called Sanaji Kwe, which in Dog Rib or Tlicho means Bear Healing Rock. It's north of Yellowknife. It's just outside of Edzo. And we used to host conferences, and it's a beautiful retreat, and there's natural clay beds. I remember North of 60 was starting, and I think it was one season in, and I remember how the Northwest Territories would just come to a standstill, and everybody would watch the show. And in those days, I felt I was too good for North of 60. I'm like, I don't want to watch a couple of moonyows in Bragg Creek, Alberta, pretending to be Northerners. I'm too busy living it. I'm too busy being a Northerner. Anyways, on this particular day, when history knocked and opportunity knocked, I was shoveling out a dog pen. And these were some pretty big dogs. I'm just going to leave it at that. These were bear dogs that Maurice Rebeska used when he was hunting up in the tundra. And I remember I had a bandana over my face, and I was shoveling. And if they ever make a movie about my life, I want the camera to pan in, and it's going to look like I'm wearing a moving sweater. But these are the horse flies and the mosquitoes and the hair eaters and the mites and the dust mite. I was being consumed as I was shoveling out this dog pen. And Maurice Rebeska came out, and he said, "Hey, Van Camp." And I was like, "Yes, boss." And he says, "Somebody's on the phone. Make it quick. Gonna have to dock ya." I was like, "Sorry, boss. I'm so sorry. Someone's trying to call me. I'm so sorry. Take it all. Take all the money. Take it all." Oh my God. I had nothing left. I was just a shadow of my former self. And I'm already straight nuts and ribs to start with. So anyways, I was shoveling up this dog pen, and he comes to me with one of the first mobile phones. It was detachable, but it had the big R2D2 antenna. He hands it to me. He's like, "Make it quick." And I was like, "Hello, hi, Richard Van Camp here. Hello." And it was Jordan Wheeler. And he goes, "Richard Van Camp, Jordan Wheeler calling you from the set of North of 60, Bragg Creek, Alberta. Hey, bud, how you doing?" "Great, Jordan, thanks." Maurice is going, right? And I'm like, "Never better. Thanks for asking. How can I help you, Jordan?" And he goes, "Listen, Wagamee's just quit. How'd you like to write for North of 60? I was like, yes, please. Yes, please. Thank you. Yes, please." He goes, "Great. That was easy. When can you start?" I'm like, "Now. Can you send someone now, please? Please now. Please help me." And so he's like, "Well, easy now, Van Camp. There's some paperwork, and you got to live in a hotel for a month, and it's only 1 month left on the residency, but we'll fly you down here. We'll pay you. It's actually disgusting how much we're going to pay you. I actually hate myself with how much I'm making right now as a dog new. Anyways, there's so much money, and so you'll be here for a month, and we need your help because we're all writers. Some of us are from Toronto and Winnipeg and stuff, but nobody here is from the Northwest Territories. So come on down. What do you say?" And I said, "Yes, okay, done." And he goes, "Great, okay, I'll call you back, or someone from the office will call you. We'll send you a plane ticket, and it's gonna be great. So we'll see you in a couple of days, Bragg Creek, Alberta." "Okay, bud, gotta go. Mussy Cho." I'm like, "Mussy Cho, Jordan, thank you, Angel, thank you. Never leave me." And then I hung up. And then Maurice is like, "And who was that? And I was like, Moise, sorry, but I quit. I quit. And then a couple days later, I was in Bragg Creek, Alberta. So that is the truth. And, I really want to acknowledge the late and great Richard Wakamis for quitting North of 60 because he got a better opportunity somewhere else. And so I was a writer trainee for North of 60 for 1 month in Calgary. And they would pick us up at 8 in the morning and drive us for an hour out to Bragg Creek. And we would do these insane 10 or 12-hour days. Nothing made sense. It was just too much. And also, when you're part of a TV series and you're a writer trainee, you're one of 9 people in a room who are writing a script. And, they were wonderful writers like Hart Hansen, Jordan Wheeler, Peter Lauderman, great writers. Gil Cardinal, the late and great Gil Cardinal, was one of our guest directors. He came in, and the actors would come in and they would have serious questions. So a lot of it was written by committee, and the producers, Barbara Pulling, no, not Barbara Pulling, Barbara Samuels and Wayne Grigsby were also writers. Everyone had their hand in the pot, and I found it very frustrating to be the only person born and raised in the Northwest Territories, competing with writers, really beautiful writers from Toronto and Winnipeg and various points from across Canada. And here's what I learned, and I want to talk a little briefly about the beauty of Indigenous literature, the opportunity of Indigenous literature and Northern literature. So every episode of North of 60, which is on YouTube for free, by the way, with full permission of the producers, the beauty of North of 60 was that we would have a script, and then the director would shoot usually an hour and 10 minutes of the story. Unfortunately, when you have a 1-hour TV show on CBC, whether it's North of 60 or any of the other hour-long ones, it really is only 48 minutes. It's actually edited to 48 minutes because it has to fit the intro, the outro, and the commercials. And what I saw firsthand with watching for a month is that the romance, the nuances, the silences, the rolling of the eyes, that would be the first to go in the editing, because often those beautiful moments that made the series Dene and Northern, the editor didn't understand, or perhaps the director didn't understand, or the producer didn't understand. And so what we had this packaged 48-minute product with an A narrative and a B narrative. And often it was missing all the beauty that I had seen each of the actors bring to set. And so I'm here to tell you that the joy of being a Northern writer, an Indigenous writer, and the joy of being an Indigenous reader and a Tlicho reader is that when I read Indigenous literature, we don't have to edit out the nuances, the romance, the sensuality, the beliefs, the humor, those pauses that can command you into stillness. We don't have to edit that. We get to choose how far we're going to bring international readers into the bedroom, into the living room, into our ceremonies, into our kitchens. We get to decide how comfortable we are with sharing what we know and what we believe to be true. So I'm really grateful that I was able to be a writer trainee for North of 60, and they loved what I had to offer. And they actually made me a script and cultural consultant, I think, for 3 or 4 seasons following. So I'm really grateful. It was during that time that I was able to make a big decision. North of 60 is set in the fictional community of Lynx River, which is supposed to be in the Tlicho region in the Western Arctic. When I started working on Me and Johnny, the short story, which became the novella, which became the novel, The Lesser Blessed, I saw that when you create, and now if anybody out there is watching, if anybody is working on a story that they're a little worried about, it's really pushing boundaries. What I would suggest is that you learn from the TV series North of 60 and you learn from The Lesser Blessed, because I saw that when you create a fictional community like Lynx River, there's no Lynx River on planet Earth. It's the fictional community, which is an amalgamation of smaller communities in the Western Arctic. The beauty of creating a fictional community like Lynx River or Fort Simmer, which I use often in my stories when I'm dealing with really hard issues, is that viewers and readers get to let their guard down and say, okay, this isn't about my community. This isn't about my leadership. This isn't about my family. This isn't about the Indigenous people that I know. I get to relax and enjoy and let my guard down. And I find that if you have a fictional community and you're ever challenged on something that's really hard, if you're going to talk about elder abuse or suicide or human trafficking, and if somebody challenges you on that, you always have the luxury of saying, but it isn't even a real place. It isn't even a real place. And there's a strength in that. And there are some stories that I deliberately choose to write about Fort Smith. And I wanted Grandpa Etsé to be set in Betchiko and Fort Smith in Yellowknife. And I'm really in awe of that story. Again, the story is the boss. And I'm really glad that that story chose me. And I'm really grateful that I got to share it with you all this evening. And I hope you loved it. When I look at that story, it's just one of those 27 books in 27 years. I will always be a disciple to the craft of writing. I'll always show up proud of where I come from. I'll always show up ready to rock in a really good way. I love stories that are funny, that deal with some pretty tough stuff. And I'm really excited about the future of Indigenous literature. I'm really excited about the books that are coming out. I'm excited about the movies that are coming out. I'm excited about the artwork, the video games. I just love how Indigenous people and Northerners, we adapt, we overcome. Whether you throw beadwork, quill work, TikTok, Instagram, Facebook, whatever is out there, you find very quickly Northerners and Indigenous people we use storms to our advantage. And I've noticed that the last 2 years, we're no strangers to waiting out storms to create our greatest work. And I've noticed that many of us are coming out of this stronger, creating beautiful books, beautiful movies, beautiful comic books, beautiful art, beautiful fashion. I'm really excited about our future. And I'm really grateful. I wish we were all tonight in Banff together feasting, and I'm sure that those good days will return to us. In the meantime, we're living in a time, it really is an embarrassment of wealth with all the beautiful books that are out there. So if you're lonesome for community, pick up a book by my friends and heroes like Eden Robinson, Wabgisha Grice, Cherie Deline. It's out there. There's so many books. It's actually impossible to keep up. Eden Robinson and I just judged a huge contest. We received 2 boxes of books, 19 books in total. I tell you, honestly, I had only ever heard of probably 7 of the 19 books and authors. And the 12 books that came out, there was one, I'm not allowed to talk about it yet, that came out of nowhere. I'd never heard of this writer. I've never heard of this publisher. I've never heard of this book before. It has won my heart. I'm not allowed to talk about it yet, but you can bet. Watch my Facebook and Twitter and Instagram. As soon as we make these announcements, I will be singing this new artist, this new author's praise. And I'm so excited for their future. And I'm so excited for everyone's future. It just seems that everybody that I mentioned in terms of the trailbreakers who are still with us, they're still creating. Some of them are creating even their most beautiful work. Mm-hmm. So I just can't wait to see what's going to happen next.
Oh, Richard. You're incredible.
Thank you.
You're welcome. So tomorrow we're going to have a conversation, and I look forward to laughing with you and learning from you and being inspired by you and kind of just connecting the way that 2 people from Fort Smith can connect.
Okay, we're going to be in cousin mode, eh?
We're going to work hard. So tomorrow, please join us. And if there's any questions you have, throw them in the chat and we'll get to them as we can. And I just want to, again, say Masio Cho and Kuyanik for joining us today, and to everyone else, for everyone that's joined us today. And yeah, I'm pretty excited for tomorrow. So please join us. And thank you.
It'll be good visiting. And if there's any questions you have, I will do my best to answer. Okay.
Sounds good.
Okay, have a great night, everybody. Masi Cho for joining us. What an honor, what a privilege to share good stories with you. And we'll see you tomorrow night.
Hello there. Good afternoon. Tlicho Atira Renalta Arluk. So hello, my name is Renalta Arluk, and I'm the Director of Indigenous Arts here at Banff Centre for Arts and Creativity. And I just want to say thank you so much for joining us yesterday for that wonderful story sharing with Richard Van Camp. And I just want to welcome him back into the space. Hello, Richard. How are you?
Renalta. I'm excited. I feel like we're at the Pine Crest in Fort Smith, Northwest Territories. We've got coffee, bottomless coffee, and fries and gravy.
Oh,
and we have an hour before your flight leaves. So it's gotta be juicy. We can't bore anybody.
Sounds good. Well, I was going to start off, thinking about how important, how incredible your stories are and how personal and connected they are into place. When you think about stories from place, I really immediately started thinking about you and the stories that you share. So thinking about Fort Smithers, how you use that as a way to connect, and Fort Smith, I mean, the beautiful thing about being from the same community is that I kind of always wonder, who is he talking about that we know? So how do you, when you create your stories, how much of you are in your stories?
Well, that's, I think, the $1 million question. Renalta, I was so lucky yesterday. I was talking about how blessed I was to go to the Inauken International School of Writing in 1991 in Penticton. And I got to have the late and great Lee Miracle and Jeanette Armstrong and the late and great Maurice Kenny, Jerry William, wonderful, incredible mentors. And it was actually Lee Miracle who gave me my wings as a writer. She said the beauty of fiction is you can fix in your life what has been broken, and you can find in your life what has been stolen. You can resurrect the dead with your writing. And when she gave me that, when she gave all of us that, it was standing room only. I just remember feeling baptized and welcomed into this power that I didn't even know that I had. And, when I realized that I was going to be tackling some really tough issues in The Lesser Blessed, I decided originally, I was sharing yesterday, that it started off as a short story called Me and Johnny, and then it grew into a novella, and then it became a small novel called The Lesser Blessed. But I realized that if I was going to really do this, then I'd better create a fictional community. And I created Fort Simmer. And from there, that also gave me the license to amalgamate all of my bullies into Darcy McManus and Jazz the Jackal. Everyone I ever had a crush on, Juliet Hope, every best friend I ever wanted and had was Johnny Beck. And then, of course, every cool boyfriend that I saw that was hanging around and shacking up with my friends' mothers, that they became my Jed. And that's the beauty of fiction is you can amalgamate and join and braid and weave, and through that find a truth that doesn't matter where you are in the world. If somebody stumbles upon something in their writing that is a jewel, doesn't matter who you are or where you're from, there's that, that's exactly the way it is here too. I think that's the beauty of fiction. You can find truth in what you're doing. Yeah.
Beautiful. And how did you end up at an Elkin? Because we're coming from Fort Smith, our families are not artists, we're kind of the first in our families to really pursue that in a less traditional, more contemporary way. How did you end up in
Well, juicy gossip hour, here we come. Okay, you ready? Okay. So what happened was, growing up in Fort Smith, probably like yourself, there were some moments when I would look around and I'd see this sea of beautiful brown faces, this beautiful Gwich'in mountain hair, Willow, Tlicho, South Levy, Bush Cree, Dene Sutlane, Chipewyan, and Inuit, of course, because of the college and because of our great community in Fort Smith. And I remember just looking around going, why are we learning this? We're never going to need this. We're never going to use this. We should really be learning our own languages. We should really be learning our own names for the planets and the stars. And just time and time again, I just felt like that I was an imposter and an agent provocateur, where we were just wasting so much time. And when I graduated from high school, I actually didn't know what I wanted to do or who I wanted to be. And then I decided to take a year off. I wasn't going to pretend and waste money and time by going to
Right.
NAIT or SAIT or U of A or UVic. And I said, I'm going to be the handy bus driver. I want to be the handy bus driver, and I just want to live a life of service. I want to figure out, I just want to take a year and just be that guy that gets to drive our elders around, our matriarchs and our 1% of the 1%, the creme de la creme, our royalty. It was the smartest thing I ever did. And while I did that, I started to hear about this course called Native Management Studies in Yellowknife. And I finally remember there was a full page ad in News North, and it said, do you want to learn more about your culture? Do you want to know more about the history of Denendeh? Do you want to take a role in self-determination? And I was like, yes. I really felt like the year I'd taken off, I'd figured out a little bit more about myself. And so I applied and I got in, and I ended up moving to Yellowknife, my first time away from home. And I ended up renting a room off of Chico Desjardins, and that's when the Press Independent was going strong, newspaper in Yellowknife, and News North and Up Here magazine. And I was there, and I got to learn about land claims and the Paulette case, the Seaweed case, the Calder case, the Horseman case, and I got to learn about Section 25, 35, and 37 of the Canadian Constitution, and that was when comprehensive land claims were starting to dissolve and land claims were going regional. And so I had this fantasy that I was going to be this land claims negotiator for the Tlicho, and I was going to secure surface rights and subsurface rights, and I was going to help save the future of the Tlicho Dene, my people. And then one day, Peter Kolchiski came in, and Ron Clausen, our instructors for English and land claims history, and they said, hey, everybody, we've got a really special guest here today. Mr. George Blondin is in town promoting his new book, Yamaraya, and he'd like to say a few words. And we've got him for about 30 minutes before he goes off to his next big interview. And I had been reading George Blondin in the Press Independent. I'd been reading his columns in News North and in the Yellowknifer, along with my uncle Johnny Washi, who was also a columnist.
Mm-hmm.
And for George Blondin to walk into the room, it was like rock royalty for me to meet a Satu Dene elder who had devoted his life to really honoring the Northwest Territories. And he told us two stories, Ronaldo, which I'd like to share with you, that changed my life forever. And the first one, he said, people will tell you, this back in 91, he said, people will tell you that medicine power is gone. It's still here. It's just changed. And he said when he was a little boy, he was walking with his grandparents out on the land, and his grandfather was a mountain dene and was a land strider and would walk, days to hunt and then days to return with food. And he was always so far ahead of the family. And his wife accepted it. My man is a provider and a hunter, and that's just the way it is. We always trail behind. And he said, I was a little boy, I was walking with my mucklucks and my little sister. And he said, I never really listened to my grandmother on how to properly tie my mucklucks so they wouldn't slide down. And they just kept sliding and sliding and sliding. And my grandmother, bless her heart with her patience, would take my shoulder and get down on one knee. And she'd say, now, George, you have to pull really tight the strings, and then you make this little rabbit ear and this little rabbit ear, and then the wolf comes and chases it, and then you have a tight knot. He said she'd be talking, I would be trying to listen, and then all of a sudden the cloud would drift across the sky, and we'd start all over. 20 minutes later, she'd be back down repairing and tying things up and tightening things, and my sister would kind of wander off. For some reason, on this particular day, he said, my grandfather was walking really far ahead, and he had the sense that something was wrong. Mm. And he turned around with his walking stick, and a grizzly bear was charging us from behind. But the grizzly, made no sound. It was just that fast. My grandmother didn't know that grizzly was just about upon us. I didn't know a grizzly bear was just about upon us. My little sister didn't know that a silver-tipped grizzly bear was just about upon us. And my grandfather let out a shout so powerful, it was like being slapped by a mountain. We were thrown from the power of his voice. And I was knocked out. My sister was knocked out. My grandmother, his wife, was knocked out by the power of his shout. And when I woke up, he says, I looked around, my ears were ringing, and my little sister was still unconscious. She had been thrown And I looked this way and I saw my grandmother, and the back of my grandmother's hand was on the belly of a dead bear. He had killed that bear with his voice. And when he opened with that story, he had us in the palm of his hands. He really, truly did. And he shared a little about the book that he had just written. You know, he wrote When the World Was New and Yamaraya and several other books. But he said, you know, he was worried that the world was forgetting about the prophets, the prophets from the Northwest Territories like Ayah. And if I could just say really quickly, he said when he was a little boy, he'd always heard about Ayah, and he actually attended Ayah's funeral in 1940 or 1941. And he said that a lot of things that Ayah said would come true. But the one nightmare that Ayah had his entire life, he would try and tell everybody. He always would try and tell the leaders and the premiers and the commissioners, the RCMP, and he would say, I have seen birds so powerful they never have to flap their wings. And I have seen white people and Dene people working together to go into the earth, and they're grabbing black eggs and they put them in the bellies of these two birds. And I've seen two birds fly so powerful they never have to flap their wings. And I've seen these two birds follow the sun where the sun goes at night. And I watched these two birds drop two black eggs on people who look just like us. And I have seen a fire so bright it leaves only their shadows on what's left of their homes. We must never help the white people when they come north looking for the black eggs in our earth. And, you know, Ayah passed in 1940 or 1941. George was in attendance at Ayah's funeral. And he said, you know, the detonation of Hiroshima and Nagasaki happened several years later. So Ayah never lived to see his worst nightmare coming true. And we didn't listen. He said, we didn't listen. We forgot ourselves because what we heard was work, 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 jobs, jobs, jobs. And, you know, the uranium that was used to develop that technology came from Port Radium and Ray Rock mines in the Northwest Territories. It also came from the Congo. It came from the United States. And so when I heard that, I have a graphic novel. It's just over there. It's called The Blanket of Butterflies. And as luck would have it, as life would have it, it was probably 20 years later after that meeting, Mr. George Blondin, I quit land claims. I said, I don't want to negotiate. I don't want to stand up in Ottawa and say, you can't handle the truth, right? That was over. He gave me my wings, just like Lee Miracle. And I realized that was what I wanted to do. I wanted to record and transcribe and really honor, you know, our inheritance as Northerners. And so I put that Ayah, that teaching of Ayah, that prophecy in my graphic novel, so that if anything happens to me, students across Canada or anyone who reads my work, that will always be in there. And I actually became George's editor 20 years later for the last book he ever published when he was still alive. It's called Trail of the Spirit, Mysteries of Medicine Power Revealed. And I got to thank him in person. And I was the one who's told him, 1991, when I thought I knew what I was going to do, you really helped put me on my path. And I'm just so proud, not only to be an author and a storyteller, but certainly to be your editor. And we worked, he hand wrote over 12 years, 500 pages, handwritten, about medicine power. And Lee Selleck, bless his heart, hired a whole pile of people to work with George's son, Ted, and get the manuscript ready for New West Press. And so one of my proudest achievements was to work with them and to get the book that he wanted out, because he kept waiting for more people to write about medicine power. And his message never strayed, and that was, people will tell you medicine power is gone. It isn't. It's still here. It's just changed. And he's right. Yeah, Mariah. Yep, that was the book. Isn't that something, eh?
Yeah. And that was the work that, getting to know you and becoming a writer and really talking about George Blondin, got us all interested, because it is stories, right? Stories are medicine. Stories are our power. And that's how we can bring that power forward, that medicine power, through story. And so that was so important. I mean, it's interesting you're talking about editing, and I know it kind of is a little bit of like not the sexiest conversation ever, but editing is vital because it is how do we navigate voice through other people's eyes, it stay true to you. And so I just want to kind of hear about, you credited it yesterday when you were talking about the story and how do you, one, like, are there editors you love working with? How do you navigate that? Who are some Indigenous editors, talking about the work you got to do for George?
Mhm. Well, I think I was saying yesterday, for those of you who didn't join us, I read a little story called Grandpa Etsay out of Moccasin Square Gardens, published by Douglas and McIntyre. My editor was Barbara Pulling and Cheryl Cohen for Moccasin Square Gardens, and that was a year of rock solid editing. And Barbara Pulling was my editor for The Lesser Blessed. So she and I hadn't worked together in 23 years. And I welcome editing. I think that I'm a good writer, but it's actually my editors that pull the best out of me in terms of craft. And I need editing because I have a lot of energy, as you can tell. And I love it when you're working with an editor who says, well, what does that mean to drop tobacco? I'm in Toronto, so you've got to, and I love that you have to prove to them that you know what you're talking about because they only want to illuminate my point. And if they don't understand what I'm talking about, a student in grade 9 in Newfoundland, St. John's, Newfoundland, isn't going to understand what I'm talking about either. And we've lost them. And so I remember when I first started writing, I wanted to get the northern nod from Fort Smithers going, that's exactly the way it is. That's exactly the way it is, right? But now with the books that we have out, I want to get that nod from the international audience. I want everyone to read what we're doing because I'm so proud of what we're doing. And that's where great editors come in. They understand that this is what you want, this is where you need to be. And it was Katarina Wenzi-Dam and with who published Angel Wing Splash Pattern. She's the publisher for Kegadon's Press. She was the one who said, I'm going to push you to a point, but you really are the boss, and there's things that I'm not going to understand about your culture, but I'm still going to ask. And I never forgot that. And I think that I've had to defend myself in just about every book we've ever done with editors and really make my point. And that's good when you have that respect. It really is a dance of trust when you're working with an editor or you're collaborating with another artist. And I love, and I know you know what I'm talking about, Renalta, that organic magic that happens when you have the right team. The art lines up, the editor, the publisher, the design. When it's on, it is like being struck by the sweetest lightning. And I'm like, this is like what Metallica felt the last night before they released the Black Album. They knew, and I know, I'm telling you right now, A Blanket of Butterflies right now, book 2 is called As I Unfold You in Petals. It's being colored right now. It'll be out next year. We're sitting on a gold mine, and I'm in physical agony that it's not out already. It's everything I am, everything I've always wanted to be. It's why you can defy gravity with comic books, and you get to meet a character who I think you're going to love named Crow. Remember that name.
I will.
One day, Renaldo, I have plans for you starring in some of our movies. And I mean that. Remember this, everybody.
Thank you, Richard.
My pleasure.
When we think about, you got me all distracted now. I'm like, oh, I'm going to play something later. But when you think about, yeah, I'm gone. I'm going to go to one of my questions over here. What I wanted to say was, you have such an incredible ability to make us laugh and make us cry, but you don't stop at that place that we kind of think storytellers stop at or that writers stop at. You keep going and you push us to you challenge our emotions to extend just a little bit longer. And it's such a gift. And where I heard that yesterday in the story that you were reading about, you could have stopped at some point in the story and we would have cried and we would have been so satisfied with that ending, but you just kept going. And it was the E.T. story about the mushroom, right? And you went on this fantastical journey about E.T. and the mushroom and the man. And I thought that is the brilliance of Richard Van Camp, is that it's just your capacity is so good, is so huge for us.
That's true. Thank you. Thank you. Well, that, I was saying yesterday, the story is the boss, and that's what the story wanted to be, where it was, hilarious, humbling, beautiful, magic, Um, you know, there, to everyone who's joining us, and I really want to thank everyone for joining us. There's a story that wants to be told. Can I tell you an Edmonton miracle story? Because I really feel that there's somebody here who needs to hear it. Maybe we all need to hear it, but I was a long time ago when Idzazi was born, our son, I was a stay-at-home dad, and we spent a lot of time at chapters on White Ave and Indigo because they had these Thomas the Train. It was free. They had all the trains. You could have a latte, you could check your messages, free Wi-Fi, and your child would play with other children, whether it was rain, sleet, or snow. And there was one day where a grandmother was there with her granddaughter, and Idzazi and this little girl just immediate were just buddies. And so after 20 minutes, it just became apparent that, I had some free time and this grandmother had some free time. We were the only people there. And she says, can I tell you an amazing story about my granddaughter? And I said, yeah, sure, please. She says, you're not going to believe it. You're not going to believe anything I'm about to tell you. I'm like, are you? Okay, let's go. I love it. I believe it already. And she said, okay. She says, when my daughter told me she was pregnant, I was terrified because my daughter was with a very, very dangerous man. I did not like him. I did not trust him. I tolerated him. And when my daughter says, Mom, you're going to be a grandmother, as a mother, you're listening and you're trying to hide the terror that you have for her, because what kind of world and house is this baby going to be raised in with that man as a father? And my daughter could tell, and she just reached out and gently touched my arm and said, Mom, it's okay. I have a plan. And I said, okay, my girl, I trust you. I love you. Okay. Yep. Okay. So when are you due? And I just kind of pushed through that fear, but I was genuinely scared for my daughter because now we were stuck with that man forever. Mm-hmm. Well, wouldn't you know, I prayed. She goes, I prayed. Oh, I prayed. I just prayed. Please, Creator, universe, just keep my baby safe. Keep my grandbaby safe. I just surround them with beautiful light, please. A couple nights later, 4 a.m, my daughter shows up, 3 Glad garbage bags of her clothes, crying in the rain. Oh, I say, you come inside. We're going to raise this baby. Oh, I'm going to get the crock pot out. We're going to have soups and stews, and we're going to go to baby wearing classes and Lamaze. We're going to learn how to pick a point on the wall and breathe backwards. And oh my goodness, it's just going to be so beautiful. You're going to be dilated and I'm going to be singing hallelujah. It's going to be fantastic. We got a baby on the way. So my daughter moves in with me, and true to my word, she goes, I got money. I'm just about a pensioner. I've got work. Our little house became a home, and we had this beautiful little being on their way. And I got to go and I got to hear the heartbeat. It sounds like a little drum, like I got to hear baby's heartbeat, and I was there again as a mother, and I was just so excited. And she says, one day, something very strange happened, and my daughter was in her first trimester, and she worked downtown Edmonton. And by the way, everybody, I'm in Treaty 6 territory. I'm in Edmonton. And she said my daughter had her tea and was walking across the street because you only have an hour for lunch. And downtown Edmonton, there's only a few shops to get lunch. So my daughter was walking to the Remedy across Jasper Avenue, and she had her tea. She was rubbing her tummy. She still had heartburn, and she got the little, Banon Blanc, the white man says go. She says my daughter was just getting ready to step off the curb with hundreds of people beside her. And as she stepped off, a light, a beautiful blue radiant light shone. And she was filled with love. She was filled with warmth and love. And then these hands came and held her. So she literally was stepping off this curb onto the walkway, but she was held. She could feel these hands on her as she was filled with this beautiful sudden love, this forever love. And a drunk driver slammed right through the crowd. A drunk driver would have killed my daughter, baby on the way. And the way the truck rammed through the crowd, it spun everybody. Everybody spun. Nobody was killed. And the truck was folded itself right in half, telephone pole downtown. And my daughter was let go, and she put her foot on the ground, and she saw the after effects, and she realized, I mean, she could tell the guy hadn't shaved that morning. That's how close it came. And she says, we are not religious people. We are not religious people. My daughter came home and she was shook. And she said, I feel like someone protected me and protected our baby. And Mom, the love I felt in that moment, she goes, when the light came, I thought, when you run a red and you get the she goes, I thought that was what it was. But Mom, the radiant and the beautiful, pure love that filled me was so beautiful. But Mom, I felt hands holding me. Somebody was holding me and kept me frozen in the air to protect us. So she said, you have to be careful when you tell people stories, because people can tell you things and try and talk you out of a miracle. But we knew that something was a little different about our baby. And the second thing that happened, she said, was when my daughter was just out of her second trimester going into her third, she says, remember that huge snowstorm 5 years ago? There were like 200 cars in Leduc. There was a 200 car pileup. It was just horrible. All the flights were canceled. And I said, oh, I do. I remember I was supposed to fly to McMurray that day to show the Lesser Blessed. She said, that day, remember how it didn't start that way? It was a beautiful, I said, yep, I was shoveling that morning, sun was shining. And then the wind started to build. She said, my daughter works downtown Edmonton. So she's got her city clothes on, her downtown clothes. She hopped on a bus, went to Save-On in the south, right next to Indigo. And that's when the storm really hit. So my daughter gets 6 bags of groceries, doesn't have a car, comes out, and none of the buses are running, none of the taxis are running. She's on the phone for an hour trying to get one cab, one person to drive her to our home. I'm freaking out because I'm calling my daughter because I'm watching the news and I don't know where she is. And she's 6-7 months pregnant.
Oh my goodness.
And she says, the taxi operator just said, you're going to have to walk. You can either ask a stranger to drive you home. Good luck with that. But you might just have to walk because we're pulling all the taxis off the road. So my daughter, who is very stubborn, she says, I'm going to walk. I've got, 3 bags here, 3 bags here. She gets them tripled up and she starts walking in a blizzard to my house. And as she's walking, she goes across, the 6 lanes, right into the forest by the railroad tracks. And as she's walking, there's a shortcut through a forest. And this is a blizzard. We've got howling wind. We've got blowing snow. My daughter's got her little high heels and her little, no long johns, no parka, no toque. And as she's walking, she gets halfway through this forest and she can feel that the baby is stressed. And she goes, oh my goodness. She puts the groceries down. She goes, oh my goodness. I forgot that I was pregnant. Oh my goodness, my girl, my boy, my baby, whoever you are, I'm so sorry. I'm so sorry. I've got to remember, I'm thinking for 2, I'm eating for 2, I'm walking for 2. And all of a sudden, a voice says behind her, can I carry your groceries home? And she turns around, Renalta, the most beautiful being on the face of the planet is standing behind her. And he was a man so beautiful, she actually lost the power of speech, radiant, glowing. And she managed to stammer, yes, you can carry my groceries. Yes, you can. And he said, you lead, I'll follow. And the reason she said yes was she thought, if I say yes, I can walk beside him and I can just gaze at him. It must have been Cree. The Crees are beautiful. Let's be honest. Anyways, but unfortunately, when you're in a blizzard, you can't walk side by side. You're breaking trail. And he didn't know where she lived. So she could hear the groceries, the ragu, the spaghetti sauce, everything together. She knew that he was walking behind her, and she walked him all the way to my house, our house. And as she opened the door, she says, I was upstairs in the loft watching TV. I had her on repeat. She was not picking up because her phone was at the bottom of her purse. And as soon as I heard the door open, I ran down the stairs. So my daughter realizes, oh, wait a minute here. I just, in a blizzard, have invited a man into my mother's house. And I don't know who this man is. As beautiful as he is, I don't know who he is. Mm-hmm. So my daughter puts one foot in the house, and I yell out, my girl, where have you been? And my daughter says, Mom, the most wonderful man, he was gone. And the groceries were right behind her. There was only one set of steps in the snow. And again, stunned. We're just stunned. She comes in, we get the groceries unpacked, we get her changed and warm. And she says, I think I saw my guardian angel. I think my guardian angel carried the groceries for supper tonight. So beautiful, so magnificent, just the most beautiful, divine, beautiful being. I'm convinced he was Cree. Anyways, so that happened in the third, second, third trimester. And then finally, when my granddaughter was born, we didn't know if it was going to be boy, girl, or anything. But when our little grandbaby was born, of course, we were so happy. Our love cups are overflowing. We got this beautiful little girl. And it was 4 months after my granddaughter was here that my daughter was invited out to supper. And just down on Gateway, there's a Greek restaurant. And it was the first time that my daughter was going to leave. It was 4 months after baby was born. And I said, we've got milk, we've got food, we're totally set. Go have fun, go be with your colleagues, but bring me a doggy bag, because this cooking, the Greek restaurant, is incredible. Grab all you can, my girl. There's no shame here. And you bring it home to grandma. So my daughter left, and we were fine. We didn't really miss her. And my daughter gets there. But there was a mix-up with the table, because they were supposed to be there at 6:30 to eat, but the people were still from a different company, were still at the table. And it was the first time my daughter got really gussied up. She was wearing heels, and it was just so hot in this restaurant. And she started to get faint, and she said to her colleague, I think I'm going to pass out. It's just so hot in here. And her colleague said, go to the bar, get some sparkly water with a twist of lemon. I'll text you when they clean out the table and we can sit. Just relax, okay? Take your jacket off, relax, put your feet up, and just relax, and I'll text you. Mm. So my daughter staggers over to the bar and orders bubbly water with a twist of lemon. And the bartender starts hitting on her right away. And she just says, excuse me, I need a moment. Okay, it's too hot in here. And he's, yeah, you're right. I'm so sorry. There's someone with the furnace. We're working on it. Anyways, I'll be right back. Okay. So he leaves. She downs this glass of sparkly water with lemon. And then all of a sudden a voice says, Lorraine. And she looks, and it's the man, it's the being, it's the beautiful being sitting in the bar next to her. And she goes, oh, hi. Oh my goodness. Hello. Hi. And he says, you have a girl. You have a daughter now. And she goes, yes, I have a little girl. Yes. Hey, thank you so much for the windstorm when you carried the groceries. And he says, I have a message. And she goes, okay. And he says, you can't worry about what your daughter's father wants. You can't worry about what your mother wants. Your life is about your daughter now. You have to do everything to protect her. Do you understand? And she goes, well, yeah, of course I understand. Then the bartender comes back and starts hitting on my daughter. And my daughter says, excuse me, I'd like to, he was gone. And the bartender said, at no time was there anyone sitting beside you. And that is really the first of many miracles I could share with you. But those are the 3 miracles that have happened to our little granddaughter. And so my granddaughter's name is Nevia, which is heaven backwards, because we believe that there are 3 times so far in her life where heaven has held her and cradled her and protected her. And I just thought, oh my goodness. And as she's telling me the story, I'm like, I had my phone, I could have recorded her. We were working on Gather, the new book about miracles, and my little boy had to use the washroom. I said, okay, we'll be right back. And so we go to the washroom, get everything ready, wash our hands. We come back. She was gone. And I never got the chance to thank her. And B, I never got the chance to record her story. But I know for a fact that somebody here needs to hear that story. I know for a fact somebody here has actually met their guardian angel before. And I just wanted to share that. And the beauty of storytelling is it's so rarely about the storyteller. If they're really I want to say a disciple to the craft of storytelling, if they're really a listener, they're sharing this beautiful group that we have. Somebody here has called that story, and you actually called it before we got here, and I was like, I got to tell this story. It's like being chased by a very, very interesting dog that is not going to let me go until I share it. So I've shared it, and I look forward to all of you, celebrating the great mystery in whatever way that means to you. I'm always in awe, and I love Edmonton because Edmonton always has times for stories. Always times. I was at the post office the other day, and I said to the lady, I said, "Hey, did you guys ever play zombie when you were growing up?" And she was like, "What's zombie?" I'm like, when you choke yourself out with your sock? And she goes, "No, we didn't do that." I'm like, "You did? Was that a Fort Smith thing?" And she goes, "No, we did wall tokes." I'm like, "What are wall tokes?" She goes, "Well, you let your breath out and then somebody presses on your rib cage as you're standing, and then you faint and you usually knock yourself out. You might break your jaw, lose a tooth, but yeah, we did wall tokes." And I was like, that is the greatest thing. So whenever I see her, I'm like, wall tokes. She's like, wall tokes. Zombie, wall tokes. Another time I was at Save On, different Save On, and I was like, "Hey, when you were growing up, did you ever do the cat's cradle?" And she goes, "Oh no, we called it cootie catchers. We called it cootie cat." And everybody has a haunted house story. I'm like, have you ever lived at, whether I'm at Safeway or fill in the blank, have you ever lived like, there's stories I can tell you, and it's fantastic. And people behind us are usually listening, like me too. I was also in a haunted house. You couldn't do that in Vancouver. You couldn't do that in Toronto. You can do it in Edmonton. That's why I love it here. This is a palace, a cathedral of stories.
It's true. I don't disagree with you at all. So I will share a little bit of, I don't think our house is haunted, but things are happening. So we have in our living room 2 shelves where all of Carver's toys are. And they just are there. They're labeled like sports, Lego, Duplo, cars, men, all of it, art supplies. And the Lego bin is it's heavy and it's deep. And 3 times that Lego has fallen off of that shelf, just fallen. And I call my mom in Edmonton, and I'm like, "Mom, there's something in the house that keeps knocking over Carver's Lego." And she goes, "I'm on my way." And so she drove from Edmonton to Banff here. And we feasted the spirits. We said a prayer, we smudged, we put sage by that, went away yesterday. So my family was gone for a week. They came back yesterday. Carver's men. So I was upstairs this morning, and then downstairs I heard this and a from the dinosaur. And I came downstairs and one of his buckets had fallen again.
One of his protectors.
I wonder.
Yeah, one of his protectors. So I'll share with you just another story that I'm convinced somebody here needs to hear. So a long time ago when I used to tour, I love teacher conferences because when I say, how many of you were bullied? Let's start. 80%. 80% of teachers. And I say, I feel that you are here to return and share the power that was taken from you. You're here to welcome kids into a safe classroom because you know what it's like to have your power taken away and to show up afraid. And I said, now, second question, how many of you as teachers used to have invisible friends? Usually with teachers, it's 70%. And there was this one gentleman, this is another one that got away. He got up and he shared a story. she said, well, first I'll tell you what the lady said. There was a lady who beat everyone to the mic, and she said, I have an invisible friend story. I said, sure. She said, when I was growing up, I grew up on a farm in Alberta, and I had a little boy named Tommy, who was my best friend because I was a single child. And Tommy would share time with me. We would spend weekends together. Summer holidays were always fun. There was always an extra seat at the table for Tommy. When we went cruising in our car on our property, there was always a teddy bear and a pillow and a seatbelt for Tommy, even though my parents could never see him. And they never made fun of him. They never made fun of me. When we went around at the end of the day, they would ask, what was your favorite part of your day? And was there anything that was difficult? And then they would say, what is Tommy saying? We can't quite hear him. And then I would always share what Tommy would say. And I would always ask Tommy, can you please come on the bus with me to school? Tommy would walk me to the bus. And he would say, well, I'm not allowed to come with you on the bus, but you go and you learn as much as you can. And when you come back, I want you to tell me everything that you're learning. And I would do that. So I had this life where I had my friends at school, and then the bus would pull up and Tommy would be waiting. And then we'd walk back to the house. And I just had this beautiful friend named Tommy. And this went on for several years, I believe. And I do remember there was one day where my mom had the silver bowl and she had pancake batter. It must have been a Sunday morning. And my mom said, my girl, you haven't spoken about Tommy in a while. Is Tommy here? Can you tell me where Tommy is? You just don't talk about him anymore. And I said to my mom, oh, Mom, I'm so sorry. I forgot to tell you. Tommy told me that he had to pass away. And my mom put the silver bowl down and she sat down next to me and she said, my girl, why would a little boy tell you that he had to pass away? Is he okay? Are you okay? And she said, oh, no, it's not bad. Tommy sat me down and he said, I have to tell you something. I'm getting ready to pass away. And I was so sad. And I said, but why do you have to pass away? And he says, I have to come back as a baby. I'm getting ready to come back as a baby. So maybe all these invisible friends are babies waiting to be born. So that's your little boy's protector, just letting you know I'm here and your boy's protected.
Yeah, it's pretty wild. It's pretty wild because it's like they're heavy, like they're so full, those little containers. Thank you, Richard. When I was, because you and I have had conversations about becoming parents, right? The struggle of doing that older in our age. Is that where we're going to be? That
older? What do you mean older? We're just getting started. My knee bones are still soft. My belly button's still wet. What are you talking about? Older? This old man dad? Hey.
I know. Okay, just me then. But I was, we had those conversations. And so when, Talis and I meet each other and we're working and we're wanting to have a child and saying lots of prayers and talk to elders about, what are some of the techniques that you have? And one of them was like, just drink lemon water every day and balance your pH level. I'm like, elders, you're so practical. Not everything is mystical. And so when I found out I was pregnant when I was in Montreal, I was doing my one woman show To Me, which is about breaking generational cycles. And I was about to buy some wine, had like a really intense day of rehearsal. I was going to the dépanneur. I was getting a cheap bottle of red. I was going to go have a nice bath, watch some Netflix. And as I was on my way to the dépanneur, a voice said, "Are you sure you want to be doing that?" And it was so loud. I was like, what? And then they're like, maybe you want to go to the drugstore instead. Like, what? And I was like, I'm like, whatever. So I go to the dépanneur, like, are you sure you don't want to go to the drugstore and buy a test? And it was so real. And I went, I guess I'm going to go do that. And so I went to the drugstore and I got a test. And then that's when it was positive. And that's the power of voice. It's just so clear when
spirit speaks, when the divine speaks. I really want to thank you for sharing that. How did you break it to your partner?
I took a picture of it with my phone and I texted it to Talis and he said, "Is this real?"
That's beautiful. That's
Yeah.
absolutely beautiful. Thank you for listening. And I think that we often will push, no, 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 they're nice people. No, 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 they would never, they would no, 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 there's no way, right? And then you learn, had I listened from
Mhm.
the get-go, even before they arrived, I knew something was off, or or I knew they were the one.
Yeah.
So we bought this house. It was actually my wife's grandmother, Sheila Martin, who sold houses for 50 years in Edmonton. She said, there's a young house builder named Dave Taylor. He's building the most beautiful houses in Old Strathcona. I've set up an appointment, and I was like, set up an appointment. It's like, no, no, you're buying a house. Interest rates are never going to be this low again in my lifetime. You're buying a house. I was like, what? Homeowners are losers. You got to get some pumps and you got to rake these little math arms. I mean, come on. And she says, no, 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 you're going. And we walked into this house and we're like, oh my God, this is the most beautiful house in the world. So we bought it, down payment. And then 3 years into buying the house, I believe, it might have been 5 years, 3 or 5. Kiwi and I were crashed out at 4 a.m. When you are with a northern man, there's something called the lead arm, and the lead arm is there's the daddy spoon and the mummy spoon, and then the lead arm is so you can never get away. It's just this drapey 80-pound love magnet of an arm, and we keep our hockey socks high and our gaunchies on just in case you never know, you gotta wake up swinging. Sometimes you don't know what's coming. So anyways, I was giving her the lead arm at 4 a.m, and I had one of my legs hooked over her hip, right? Just again, you ain't getting away. This is love. This is right. So 4 a.m, I'm crashed out, breathing into her ear, right? And that is not how the Cree do it. I'll tell you right now. There's a whole different thing. So anyway, so I draped completely over her 4 a.m, and I had a vision. And I had a vision, and I saw our house up on a hill. And trust me, we're in Edmonton. There are no hills where we live. I saw our house on a hill, and I don't know if you know this story, Renaldo, but I saw a little boy standing outside.
No.
I saw Zazi standing in front of me, and he was standing on his tippy toes, and he was fluttering his hands like a little night moth. And he was wearing a beautiful brown sweater, and he had the most beautiful brown skin, beautiful cinnamon skin. I could see his ear, I could see his cheek. I didn't want to scare him away. I did not want to scare him away. And all he wanted to do was come home. All he wanted to do was fly home. And I was standing behind him, and I just wanted to see his eyes, just like the lady who wanted to see that divine being. If I could just look, then I could gaze upon this beautiful being. And I remember just looking and seeing the beautiful cheeks, his beautiful ear, beautiful skin, just a little tiny little nose. And as I got closer, I went, and I woke up and I was holding Kiwi, and I said, "Sweetheart, we're going to get pregnant this year, and we're going to have a son. He has all 10 fingers, all 10 toes, and he is beautiful. He is magnificent. Oh my goodness." So of course she started crying. I started crying. Everyone started crying their heads off. And then 13 months later, he was born across the hall in his room. We had a home birth. We had a water birth. And, you know, we didn't know if we were going to have a boy or a girl or a little bear. The first, I think, 5 minutes that Azazi was here, I wouldn't let anyone near. I was just holding and singing, and everyone was crying, and it was beautiful. And their little belly button nub is buried under a tree in our yard, and that was a teaching that was given to us by the late Dot Desjolais from Fort Smith. So that way the land will always, they have a treaty together, this land and our boy. And also they'll always know where they're from. That was something that Dot wanted us to do. And I will say, you talk about what Mr. Blonin said, people will tell you medicine power is gone. It's still here, it's just changed. So when Azazi was 6, I was teasing him. And I said, little boy, mommy gets the hugs and the snuggles and the kuniks and the kisses and the little nibbles, and daddy gets a punch to the short ribs when I walk by. I said, why does mommy get all the love in this relationship? And he looked at me in the eye and he said, when mommy was born, I was already in her tummy. I've known her longer. And my jaw actually touched this little bony collarbone of mine. I'm telling you, I was humbled to my core that we are dealing with the ancient with our children. Remember, Geraldine Minosa, I think I shared this with you, my dear friend who's Cree, said that every little boy is his mother's greatest teacher. Every little girl is her father's greatest teacher. And we have these divine teachers. And I really do believe it's children who have carried us through this pandemic. Our children have given us purpose and joy and warmth and laughter, and bless them for being with us and being our lighthouses through this. They've given us purpose, haven't they? They've been our medicine, our own divine medicine through all of this. Bless them.
Yes, absolutely. Thank you, Richard.
You like those stories where I get told off, eh?
Punch to the gut. We are from Smith. And so, yeah. I mean, that's how we show love. When you were saying that yesterday, we were going through little isms that we hear. Mine was always wasn't to me, but I'd always hear, oh, she thinks she's so good. She think her shit don't stink. That was like such a terminology. And you grow up with all of those in your mind. And then you come down south and people don't talk like that to each other in that same sort of way. And so it's always a bit of like, oh, I'm unlearning or relearning or reconnecting or disconnecting a little bit of our Fort Smith truth, right?
Mm-hmm. Well, Kiwi can always tell when I've just called home because I've got the accent and the strut. My sideburns puff up. Do you know what I mean? I divert blood to my top upper lip. Looks like a hockey puck. I can't explain it. You know what I mean? There's nothing like the power of home. And I'm so grateful I can still call Marlene Evans in Fort Smith. I can still call my dad. I can call my brother, my mom. I'm so grateful because that connection, I need that connection to do what I do as a father and as a husband, and certainly as a writer and a storyteller. And to go back to those master storytellers like Richard Mercury Sr. or Earl Evans or Henry Beaver or Eileen Beaver and get the skinny and say, you told me when I was 19 years old, the story about the UFO that came to visit you when you had 27 caribou outside of Ray Lakes. It was 37 below. To get that story down properly with permission from elders like Richard Mercury Sr. and his wife Barb, that to me is the good work. That's the soul work, and it's a privilege to be able to go to those who know, who are still here, and to say, in Maria Brown's story, when she was curing asthma using goose grease, she talks about a neighbor and they're like, oh, that would be so-and-so. I'm so lucky I still have that. Do you know what I mean? And
yes.
That's really my wish for everybody, is that you can pick up the phone and touch base with your elders and, those lighthouses. Yes. So anyways, gather, Renalta, thank you for carrying it, is really a celebration of some of the greatest miracle stories I've ever heard in my entire life. Yeah.
It's so true. I've been chatting with my grandmother lately, because you do think, we think stories are not always in this, like stories are sacred, but they're always in those, it's all in the crevices of life, right? It's the crevices and the people that have lived it. And then you kind of, they're the teachings that come. My grandmother, we saw her over the holidays. She came down. I hadn't seen her because of COVID. I haven't been able to go back to Fort Smith and see everyone just until recently. And, she was sharing some painful stories. And at the end of it, she said, I thought I would never say these words out loud. And I think, when we think about reaching out, but it's actually calling in. And I learned that gift with Kevin Loring was one of our speakers, and he works with an elder, and she had said, when you call us in, we've been displaced because of residential school. We've been displaced because of 60 Scoop and all the things that we experience in our own life. That young people calling us in gives us a great purpose. And that changed the way that I think about elders and knowledge keepers, because I'm always worried about extraction or like just taking. I always think about like, what is our responsibility? But then when she framed it in that way, I went, we're giving purpose to words by calling in their knowledge and their stories so that, they can do the work that they're meant to do in the time that they have, like not time that they're going to pass away, but in their time of like, they're older, they have that knowledge, that depth, that reflection.
Tapway, you're right. Absolutely. And I
Yeah.
think the great theft of COVID is that there's a whole pile of elders and knowledge keepers that are sitting on these gold mines of stories and teachings and techniques, etc. And that's where the good listeners that observe protocol, now that there's these vaccines and science, thank you, science, and outside is safe. My message to everybody here is, we've been in a storm for 2 years. As Northerners, we're no strangers to waiting out storms to do our best work. So use this time to gather those medicines that you need for yourself so that you come out of this stronger. Don't you dare hold back your love. Don't you dare, second guess yourself in what you need to do. You get those stories, whether it's recipes or names or songs or prayers or hymns, fishing techniques, looming techniques, beading techniques. So get them now, get them now and embrace the technology. 2 years ago, we didn't know what Zoom was, right? And you can record, you've got FaceTime, pick up the phone, check in on your elders, go to those who know and observe with protocol. Ask them for what you need, because I know for a fact there are a lot of lonely elders out there that are just waiting for the right person with a good heart to show up, who wants to learn.
Oh, thank you. Masicho.
Masicho. Masi. Thank you, Renalta. Yay. Well, we'll see you again when it's safe to do so.
Yes.
I look forward to feasting with you outside and hopefully feasting with everybody here and, having a good laugh. But I would love to hear your stories too. And, I'm always up for a good miracle story. And I'd love to hear your stories where, you were brushed with the divine. I love stories like that. And I just wish everybody a beautiful night. I know we're out of time. I can't thank you enough, Renalta and the Banff Centre and everybody who's helping with this broadcast. I wish everybody who gets to see these stories, hopefully these stories touch your heart. And I hope you read Mr. George Blondin. I hope you read his beautiful books, because he was the one who really helped me on my path. And please read the late and great Lee Miracle and Jeanette Armstrong and all these beautiful radiant trailbreakers like Ruby Slipperjack and Alatuk Ipali, Beth Brandt, Christos. I mean, so many people we have to thank for the good work that we're able to do. We couldn't do what we do without them. Bless them all. It's like Lee Miracle said to a student one day, "I kicked down doors for you." What a great line. She did. You know what they say in Smith? God hates a coward. Don't be a freaking coward in your life. Risk it. Okay, now we got all Fort Smith on each other. Okay, I love you. I gotta go. I got a chicken pot pie in the oven. I gotta go.
Go get it. Go get it.
Okay.
Masi.
All the best, everybody. Masi Cho. Have a great night.